Glad you could make it, even though we had a little war and some civil unrest and all the rest of the stuff that happens in Israel in a regular week. And here we are on Friday, just continuing as if everything's completely normal. And my name is Sigalit. I come from Shorashim, which is up in the north, in the Galilee near Carmiel. And I've been teaching in these regional study days and in central study day for a few years now. I'm a Rabbi, not a graduate of Shechter, but of the rabbinical program at Hartman and the Midrasha Be'orani. And I have a doctorate in Talmud, which is my central passion. It's always a pleasure to come and teach. I'm not a congregational rabbi, I'm a teaching rabbi, so this is what I do. Mostly up in the north, going from community to community, meeting people and teaching. And for today, we have a story that starts in the Tanakh and continues through the Gemara and finishes off in one or two poems that I hope we'll get to. And it's a story about difficult times and about leadership dilemmas and about the perseverance of women. And we're going to connect it to the here and now at the end. That's kind of the preview. And since we're a small group, then maybe we could just do a round of names and where you're from, just so it's not just me. We did a mini round before, but now we have.
Lamar from Beersheba.
Ora from Jerusalem. Maribeth from Jerusalem.
Helen from Jerusalem.
Janet Tobin from Renana.
Oh, and you're the founder, I gather,
okay.
4 times.
Yes, I am the Janet Tobin they were talking.
Toda Rabba. Well, it's a wonderful project. Indeed, it's really amazing how it perseveres through. I mean, talking about the perseverance of women, wow.
And we started this about 28 years, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And
through COVID.
Corona now, this is the 27th year that we are here at Checkta. So that's is really wonderful.
Through COVID, war, and revolution. Okay, so I'm going to share the presentation that I prepared that mostly just has sources. The woman that we're going to be meeting at the end of the story, her name is Ritzpa Bat Aya, but it's going to take us a while to get there. And it's going to take us a while because it's a story that has roots in various mythological parts of our history. And since we're kind of short on time, I'm going to skip through a few of the sort of prerequisites and then get to the actual story pretty quickly. The first prerequisite that I want to mention is the Gibeonites. This is the story of the people who met Joshua and Bnei Israel, the tribes, when they entered finally the land of Israel and were ordered to basically conquer and exterminate all the Canaanites. And the Gibeonites, who were a small group of Canaanites, decided to trick Joshua. And they basically put on costume, pretending to be people from very, very far away from outside of Canaan. They put on tattered clothes, they brought along moldy bread and broken down water containers, and they came up before Joshua and the other leaders and they said, "We heard about you, we're from really, really, really far away, and we want to sign a treaty with you." And Joshua consults and decides to sign a treaty, but then he discovers a little bit later that actually these people are not from so far away as they purported to be, but rather they're Canaanites, one of those peoples that he was ordered to conquer and exterminate. And the people come up to him and say, "Well, you know, they tricked us, so we don't owe them anything." And he says, "Well, actually, I signed a contract. And I signed a contract in the name of God, so I can't really just, tear it up." And he says, "You know what? I have a solution. We'll keep the contract, but we'll make them into second-class citizens. They'll be our water drawers and our wood choppers, and It's always nice to have people to do that stuff for you. And that's the Gibeonites from the time of Joshua. Fast forward another couple of hundred of years until the time when finally the 12 tribes of Israel are made up into a kingdom, and Saul, the king, is ruling over them until he loses favor in the eyes of the Lord and is shunted aside in favor of David. And as you probably remember, Saul was killed or actually committed suicide in the final stages of one of those battles against the Philistines. His 3 sons were killed in that battle, and he also saw that everything was lost, and instead of being taken by the Philistines, he asks his servant to kill him, and then he basically falls on his sword and kills himself. The Philistines find his body and the bodies of his sons, and they take them and basically hang them up on the walls of the city of Beit She'an. If any of you have been to Tel Beit She'an, in modern day Beit She'an, you know that there are 2 parts there. There's the Roman era part that has all these very impressive, columns and things, and then there's the Tel, there's the hill, which is the biblical era Beit She'an. And according to the biblical story, that's where the bodies of Shaul and his sons were hung. As a demeaning gesture. And the people of Yavesh Gilad, which is a town on the other side of the Jordan, an Israelite town, whom King Saul had saved in the beginning of his reign, engaged upon a daring commando mission to rescue the bodies of Saul and his sons and bury them in Yavesh Gilad or nearabouts. Those are the 2 sort of background things that we should know. And then we reach our story. Before I dive in, I wanted to say something really important. We're a small enough group, but even when we have a large group, don't wait for the question and answer session at the end, okay? If you want to ask or if you want to comment, offer a different interpretation, whatever, just dive in. Including Betty, sure.
What is the meaning of Yavesh?
It's the name, well, Yavesh is dry, but it's just the name of the town.
Is there any indication
There's,
that there were the same people who met Joshua?
no,
Those people.
this is unconnected. The people who met Joshua were the Gibeonites.
Gibeon.
We'll meet them soon. It's Givonim,
Okay.
from the town of Givon, which has other stories connected to it, but not this one. That's the Givonim, that's one group. And then the people of Yavesh Gilad, those are Israelites from across the Jordan. So here's Saul in his dying throes. And then we get to the story in the 2nd book of Samuel. This is already fast forwarding a few years when King David is reigning. And the Bible says that there was a famine during the reign of David, year after year for 3 years. Now, we all know living in Israel that droughts are, they happen.
Sorry, my God, on silent.
It's okay. But year after year for 3 years means there's something wrong. And true to biblical approaches and also Chazal, also the sages, people assume that a long drought means that we've done something wrong. It can't be just a climatological fact. It's got to be something for soul searching. So David inquired of the Lord. Apparently, there's nothing obvious. Everybody's tithing properly and keeping Shabbat and giving tzedakah to the poor and whatever. Everything's fine. So David asks, what's the problem? And the Lord replied, it is because of the blood guilt of Saul and his house, for he put some Gibeonites to death. Okay, we talked about the Gibeonites who met Joshua. We fast forward to Saul to his deathbed. There is no biblical story about any connection between Saul and Gibeonites. None. Until this one. So when God says, oh, it's because of the blood guilt of Saul and his house where he put some Gibeonites to death, we have no idea what he's talking about. And we'll see that the Talmud will have something to say about that, but here it's just this statement. Okay, so
Is that a common thing? Like, are there other examples in the Tanakh of, where you seem to have missed an episode in the story?
that's a good metaphor. Nothing comes to mind. That's actually a good question because it would be, I mean, those are the places where the Talmud, perks up its ears and says, oh, interesting. Maybe I'll try to fill up that missing episode. And that's what we're going to do. But nothing comes to my mind right now. Okay, so maybe David knows, but anyway, the king, David, summoned the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now, the Gibeonites were not of Israelite stock, but a remnant of the Amorites, one of the Canaanite, the 7 nations, to whom the Israelites had given an oath. So this is like a comment in brackets, giving the background that I gave a little bit before. This is a few hundreds of years later, so reminding the reader, who are these Gibeonites? Oh yeah, those. And Saul had tried to wipe them out in his zeal for the people of Israel and Judah. Now, this second bit, there's no story about that. We don't know where this came from, but here it's just stated. So David asked the Gibeonites, what shall I do for you? How shall I make expiation so that you may bless the Lord's own people? So apparently now the fate of the Israelites lies in the hands of the Gibeonites because some kind of sin has been committed against them and some kind of expiation needs to be made in order to fix that, in order for us to be clean and then for the rain to fall. And so the Gibeonites answered him, we have no claim for silver or gold against Saul and his household, and we've no claim on the life of any other man in Israel. And he responded, whatever you say, I will do for you. Basically, he's begging them, tell me something. I want to do something to get out of this. Thereupon, they said to the king, the man who massacred us and planned to exterminate us so that we should not survive in all the territory of Israel, so apparently referring to Saul again.
Had more children.
Well, he's dead. But so they want, let 7 of his male issue, not children, but
Grandchildren.
well, children and grandchildren, be handed over to us, and we will impale them before the Lord in Giv'ah of Saul, the chosen of the Lord. So we'll get to the impalement thing soon, but first I want to direct you to the accusations against Saul. That, as I said, we have no record of the story as it happened. But notice how it sort of escalates, because initially we'd heard Saul had tried to wipe them out. And then, before we said he put some Gibeonites to death. That's the first time that we hear about it. Then it says Saul had tried to wipe them out, which is an escalation. And then massacred us and planned to exterminate us so that we should not survive in all of the territory of Israel. That's another escalation. All of these that we don't really know what they're talking about, but it seems that initially we have a rather smallish incident, right? He put some Gibeonites to death. Not very nice, but some Gibeonites. And then we have wiped them out. And then in the eyes of the Gibeonites, we have widespread extermination. And we don't know, whether it's their narrative or, whether they've decided to magnify it in order to magnify their demands or whatever. But suddenly we're hearing about something really major that has happened in this context. And we've no idea. So the Gibeonites say, you know what, if you insist, we said initially that we don't need anything, but if you insist, then give us 7 of Saul's descendants and we'll impale them, and then it's going to be closed. And the king replied, I will do so. Basically meaning, sacrifice 7 innocent people in the hopes that this will expiate the sin that we don't exactly know the details of, which is causing perhaps the drought, which is causing the famine. So, it's interesting and kind of disturbing. What's going on?
Mephibosheth appears twice. Is it 2 different?
Yes, so it's confusing, which is why Mephibosheth, the name. Yeah. So let's take a break here first and look at this complicated family tree of Saul, okay? Here's Saul, the king. Here's his legal wife, Ahinoam, and 3 sons who died with him in the battle with the Philistines. And Ishbosheth, who's the remaining son, who for a while there, for a few years, there was a period in which Ishbosheth ruled the 10 tribes of Israel and David ruled Judah in Bethlehem. So this is the remaining son. But the story is taking place after Ishbosheth has already died in the context of the fight. We have Saul's 2 daughters, Michal and Merav. Michal, you probably remember, was married to David.
Then she didn't have any children.
And they said she didn't have any children. And Merav has 5 children, we don't know their names, grandsons of Shaul. And then Saul also had a concubine called Ritzpah, who will be our heroine soon. Saul and Ritzpah had 2 sons, Armoni and Mephibosheth. But to complicate matters, Jonathan, Saul's son, who was, you may remember, David's soulmate, before Jonathan died, apparently he had a son called Mephibosheth. So we have Mephibosheth, the son of Saul from Ritzpah, the concubine, and we have Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson, Jonathan's son, who is disabled. There's a rush to save the family from the Philistines who are attacking, and a nursemaid picks him up when he's a small child, and she drops him, and he's handicapped in his legs. So this is the picture. Avinadav, Malkishua, and Jonathan and Ishbosheth are out of the picture. The first 3 died in the war. The 4th died in the struggles for the kingship. And we have 2 children of Saul and Ritzpah, 5 grandsons of Saul from Merav, and Mephibosheth, a grandson from Jonathan. 8. And you may recall that the Gibeonites demanded 7. Why 7? Maybe because it's it's a typological figure, but that's who they demand. And before going on to see how they do it, I want to direct you to the fact that the king, with some electricity, jumps to it. He doesn't try to bargain. He doesn't try to argue. He doesn't try to reason with him. What's the connection? Why will killing those 7 people do anything for you? I mean, okay, so you have something against their father or grandfather, but why take it out on his sons and grandsons? David says, I will do so. I want to open a parenthesis here and say that some people read the story and say, isn't it interesting that David somehow manages to get rid of all of Saul's relevant descendants so that they don't compete with him for the kingship. You know, 3 sons killed in a war, 1 son assassinated in the course of the struggles, 7 sons sacrificed in order to save the people of Israel from the drought, and the remaining son, Mephibosheth, the grandson, the son of Jonathan, survives but is unable to be a rival for the kingship because he's handicapped, and it's not a done thing at the time. But I want to put that political sort of viewpoint, hi Diane, on the side and concentrate on this, which is this terrible dilemma that David has, where he is apparently required to sacrifice these 7 men, innocent men, in order to save the people of Israel from the drought. And how do you do that? Are you allowed to do that? I mean, imagine the situation. The Talmud actually explicitly says, if your enemies say, you should give us a person and we will kill him, and then we'll let all of the others of you go, then you shouldn't do it. If they tell you, give us someone who deserves death, that's okay. But if it's just, you know, some kind of vendetta between them and him, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to sacrifice somebody to save the lives of the community.
Yeah, but this is God.
Well, God said that that's the reason for the drought. God didn't say sacrifice these people. You know, this is the Gibeonites demanding that.
So now you would say maybe they need to go back to God and say, well, we'll take it to the Court of Appeals.
Maybe, or maybe invest a little more effort in trying to speak to the Gibeonites, because it doesn't seem that David's doing a lot of that here.
Yeah.
I think that we also see other sides of David's character. And this is a very nice little package,
Convenient.
very convenient. You know, I'm doing for the good of the Israelites. You know, it's out of my hands. And I already had said, whatever you say, I'm gonna do. So how am I gonna start bargaining now? It's just.
At
Right.
the end of his reign also, he gave orders for a whole lot of people to be killed.
That's true. Yes, but I just want to, you know, I wanted to point out some of the moral dilemmas here because they are supposed to be dilemmas, you know, even if he is secretly kind of happy, it's not something that a king's supposed to do easily.
David and Jonathan were very close.
Right.
They were really best friends, so certainly, whatever Saul did other than that, he would never ever touch Jonathan's children, family, etc. And whether he had the right to do that, just give away someone else's children for the sake of the Gibeonites, I don't know, it's a question, because I think when the Gibeonites came and wanted to be part of Israel at the time, they were refused by Saul. And
Well, we don't know exactly what the
We don't know.
interaction was between Saul and the Gibeonites, but apparently he did something bad to them.
right.
Right. I want to pick up on your comment about David not doing anything bad to Jonathan's family and remind us that Mephibosheth is Jonathan's son, and remind us that the Gibeonites demanded 7 out of, we know that there are 8. So here's another moral dilemma, which is how do you pick 7 out of 8? Who decides? How decide?
Yeah.
And you're suggesting maybe, well, Mephibosheth's the son of my best friend, my dead best friend, who I promised before he died that I would not do anything bad to his children. So maybe the answer is clear. But again, is that something that a king should do? I mean, sadly, we have the situation kind of in our reality today. Imagine the situation where a Ramatkal knows that his son or his grandson is in some kind of unit and says, oh, you know what, we'll send another unit instead. That's not something that we want to happen. And maybe
We have the Iranian rulers now, that if any of the young people even come out, they're arrested, they're thrown in jail and they're killed. So they though are horrible people, and
Yeah.
you just don't kill for the sake of killing. And for lifting or doing something that may help the rest of the community, because you're not sure if it really will.
yeah, but even if you decide to kill, then this choice of how do you say who lives and who dies, basically. That's another big dilemma here.
They say, you know, that they have no claim for silver or gold or for life and which implies that, you know, you could offer us either money or people, that they would have settled for money.
Yeah, we would have expected David to be a little more active about trying to buy
Pay them off,
something
wouldn't
else, and he doesn't seem to do that.
Go for that too.
Yeah, there are a lot of things when you read the story that you kind of, you know, they're not very palatable. So the king spared Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, son of Saul, because of the oath before the Lord between the two, between David and Jonathan, son of Saul. Instead, the king took Armoni and Mephibosheth, the two sons that Ritzpah bat Ayah bore to Saul, and the 5 sons that Merav, daughter of Saul, bore to Adriel, son of Barzillai, the Mecholatite, and he handed them over to the Gibeonites. Very neat. 2 + 5, 7, leaving Mephibosheth, keeping that oath, and here we are. And true to their promise, they impaled them on the mountain before the Lord. All 7 of them perished at the same time. They were put to death in the first days of the harvest, the beginning of the barley harvest.
That's the end of the story.
Nope. Here we go. Then Ritzpah, daughter of Ayah, remember the mother of 2 of those 7 who were put to death and their bodies impaled, took sackcloth and spread it on a rock for herself, and she stayed there from the beginning of the harvest until rain from the sky fell on the bodies. Now, the beginning of the harvest, the barley harvest, is springtime.
Yeah.
And rain, as we know, is fall, is, you know, October. So she stayed there for...
Can rain in the sun.
Yes, but, well, we'll see the remainder of the story. She did not let the birds of the sky settle on them by day, or the wild beasts by night. And she's there, basically. She sits there in the sun, in the heat, in the cold, whatever, and she guards those bodies. David was told what Saul's concubine Ritzpah, daughter of Ayah, had done. And David went and took the bones of Saul and of his son Jonathan from the citizens of Yavesh Gilad, who had made off with them from the public square of Beit She'an, where the Philistines had hung them up on the day the Philistines killed Saul of Gilboa. He brought up the bones of Saul and of his son Jonathan from there, and he gathered the bones of those who had been impaled, those 7, and they buried the bones of Saul and of his son Jonathan in Seilah, in the territory of Benjamin, in the tomb of his father Kish. And when all that the king had commanded was done, God responded to the plea of the land thereafter.
Does that mean that also including those bones of those who've been impaled?
Yes.
Because here it doesn't quite.
Well, he says the bones of those who'd been, the bones of Saul and of his son Jonathan, and the bones of those who'd been impaled, implying that impaled, you know.
But then it says that they buried the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan.
Ah, I see what you mean. Yes. So what's going on here? I mean, what's the connection between Ritzpah's actions and then David's actions? It says David was told what she'd done, and he goes and he picks up Saul and Jonathan's bones from Yavesh Gilad, and he collects the bodies of those who've been impaled. And notice that when that had been done, then God responded. So it seems that God is satisfied not when the Gibeonites are satisfied, because they were satisfied when they impaled the bodies, right, in the spring. Here it seems that God is satisfied only when David has buried the bodies and brought closure to these stories. Now, arguably, I think it's not really far-fetched to say that perhaps there's a connection. It looks like Ritzpah didn't do really much. I mean, what did she do? She just sits there and shoos away the birds. But there's something about her action that David hears about and that affects him in a way that he decides to redeem these bodies and bring them to proper burial.
Yeah, and she didn't decide, I'm going to take up a collection and get these two sons of mine buried. She didn't say anything.
Right, she just sits there. It's really passive, it seems, but somehow there's something about her action that sets things in motion that ultimately bring the story to conclusion. That's the biblical story.
Drive the hostages and the ones that were here for in around for many, many, many years that we prayed for the rest of the year. At least we finally got the bones back. And there is closure. There is closure.
Yeah, I think the story really resonates in some of our recent events. This is the biblical story, which is interesting enough. But then there's also a Talmudic sugya, which looks at this story and is curious about all these strange points that we mentioned and tries to offer solutions for a few of them. So here's this part from Masechet Yevamot, Tractate Yevamot, and I brought it with Steinsaltz's commentary. You probably see that there are two fonts here. There's the bold font, which is the original parts of the Talmud, and then Steinsaltz adds sort of a few words here and there in order to make it readable in a convenient manner. So we'll just read them and in the flow. And the sugya starts by quoting the pasuk that we read. The king called the Gibeonites and said to them, "What shall I do for you? With what shall I make atonement that you may bless the inheritance of the Lord?" And the Gibeonites said to him, "It's not a matter of silver or gold between us and Saul or his house, neither is it for us to put any man to death in Israel. Let 7 men of his sons be delivered to us, and we will hang them up to the Lord." So far, biblical verses. Now notice what the Talmud adds. He tried to appease them in other ways. Do we find that in the biblical narrative?
No.
Not a mention. And I want to suggest that the Talmud read it with us and was discomforted by that. Felt that David should have been more active. And so since the Talmud is trying to draw a more humane David, it adds this appeasement activity, which has no foundation in the biblical text, to say, yes, that's something that David should be doing. He tried to appease them in other ways, but they would not be appeased. He really tried to find some other way, and only when that was unsuccessful did he go on to the next step. Every time there's this kind of addition in the Talmud, I think that's sort of a flag that says there's something not right in the way that the biblical character is behaving here. And we want to smooth the story by suggesting an amendment that will make things. Now, we could view it as trying to clear David's name and tell a more nice story about him. And we also could view it as the Talmud trying to show us the proper way of behavior, trying to say, okay, we know that's the story that the Bible told, but if we want the Bible to show us how leaders should behave, then there's obviously an amendment that needs to be made here. Leaders should try to do their utmost to make sure that their constituents are not put to death unnecessarily. And so David should have tried to appease them, even if he didn't do so according to the biblical narrative. Now, here's an interesting aside. David said there are three distinguishing marks of this nation, the Jewish people. They are merciful, they are shamefaced, and they perform acts of kindness.
You remember the Hebrew for the shamefaced?
הם רחמנים, ביישנים וגומלי חסדים. ביישנים, רחמנים, ביישנים וגומלי חסדים. And basically what he's saying is, well, you know what? These Gibeonites, I know they joined us hundreds of years ago, but we can still see that they're not really Jewish. Because if they were Jewish, how would they demand such a cruel act? How do you know a Jew? When you see a person who's merciful and shamefaced and performs acts of kindness. And I think that's a very resonating statement here. You want to show a sign of being Jewish, those are the signs of being Jewish. Merciful, shamefaced acts of kindness. I'm skipping a bit because it's a long sugya. And again, quote from the Bible, from the Tanakh, and the king took the two sons of Ritzpah, daughter of Ayah, whom she bore unto Saul, Armoni and Mephibosheth, and the 5 sons of Michal, daughter of Shaul, whom she bore to Adriel, the son of Barzillai the Mecholati. What is different about these sons that David chose them? Rav Huna said, he passed all of Saul's descendants before the Ark of the Covenant. Whoever was held back by the Ark was condemned to death. Whoever was not held back by the Ark was set apart for life. Oh, so it turns out it's not David who decided, right? It's God who decided. And again, from this addition that has no foundation in the biblical text, we understand that the Talmud feels discomforted, morally, ethically, by the story that is explicit in the Bible about David giving preferential treatment to the son of his friend and deciding, therefore, to kill the other 7 brothers, or brothers and their grandsons. No, it's not David who decided, it's God who decided. But the rabbis aren't happy with this. Rav Chana bar Ktina raised an objection. The verse states, and the king had pity on Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, son of Saul, because of the Lord's oath that was between them, between David and Jonathan, son of Saul. Wait, says Rav Chana. Don't, smooth it over. The biblical text explicitly says that David gave preferential treatment to Mephibosheth. So don't try to tell me these stories. And the Talmud answers, he didn't pass Mephibosheth before the Ark. Okay, he kept him back and he passed those 7. And the Ark chose them. So, there were those 7. But again, the Sugya asks, may favoritism be shown in this matter? I mean, it's not random. How come I left Mephibosheth to be the last? It's still preferential treatment, and he's not supposed to do that. Rather, what happened was that David passed Mephibosheth before the Ark, and the Ark held him back. But David immediately asked for mercy on his behalf, and the Ark released him. Okay, so, David did the right thing. He passed him before the Ark. The Ark actually chose Mephibosheth, but David prayed, and the Ark released and went on to a different son. The Holocaust connections immediately arise. Those terrible stories of the people who were in these moral conflicts about whether to try to save their own kids at the price of having another kid taken because they needed to make up numbers. And the Sugya continues to say, but the difficulty still remains. May favoritism be shown in this matter? Even praying by David for Mephibosheth, that's favoritism too. I mean, he didn't pray for the others. He prayed for Mephibosheth. Again, it's favoritism. And we expect our leaders not to show favoritism.
We also expect them to keep promises and be more to promise.
Right, but this story there's so many dilemmas here. Yes, he made a promise to his friend, but he also has commitment to his people. And how can people trust their leader if they know that he practices favoritism for the children of his friends? So the Sugya tries this answer. Rather, David asked for mercy that the ark should not hold him back. So it's not that the ark chose him and David asked him to be released. David passed all 8 and he privately prayed, oh, please make it not be Mephibosheth, but you decide. And God decided. You sense that it's not a perfect solution, right? I mean, even in this case, David still prayed for Mephibosheth to be released. But at least he's leaving the decision in the hands of God, so... All right. Now the Sugya moves on to another moral dilemma. But isn't it written, the fathers shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers, right? It's a biblical principle. Okay, so Saul sinned, but how can you be giving up his children and grandchildren to be killed because of his sin? It's a biblical principle that you shouldn't be doing that. And here's a very interesting response. Rabbi Chia bar Abba said, that Rabbi Yochanan said, it is better that one letter and one mitzvah be uprooted from the Torah in this manner, and thereby the name of heaven not be desecrated in public. Basically, what he's saying, and it's cryptic right now, but we'll understand it later. It's saying, okay, we know this is a biblical principle, but it's worth transgressing against this biblical principle in order for God's name not to be desecrated. We don't understand this yet, but hold it, okay? We'll see soon. But first, the Sugya asks another question. Quoting again from the Tanakh, it says, Ritzpah, daughter of Ayah, took sackcloth and spread it for her upon the brook from the beginning of harvest until water was poured upon them from heaven, and she allowed neither the birds or the air to rest on them by day, nor the beasts of the field by night. Isn't it written, his body shall not remain all night upon the tree, but you shall surely bury him the same day, right? You're not supposed to leave bodies just hanging up there. You're supposed to take them down because it's a desecration of human dignity.
Plus the souls as well.
Right, but the people of Yavesh Gilad saved those bodies. But here, David is giving them up to the Gibeonites, not only to be killed, but also for their bodies to be desecrated, because Ritzpah is sitting there not just for a few hours, she's sitting there for months. So how can David let them keep those bodies impaled if it, again, it's an explicit biblical mitzvah? And again, a similar answer, Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yotzadak, it is better that one letter be uprooted from the Torah and thereby the name of heaven be sanctified in public. Okay, we're with...
Sanctified?
Exactly. Right, mystery upon mystery. How is punishing the sons for the sin of the father, avoiding desecrating the name of God? How is keeping the bodies up sanctifying the name of the Lord? What's going on here? And here's their explanation. How so? As the Gentile passers-by would say, what is the nature of these people, right? I mean, they're hanging there for months, and people are traveling by, and they're asking, what is this? Who are these people? This is not something that we do here, so why are these people hanging up? And they were told that these were sons of kings. And they asked the passers-by, what did they do to deserve such a fate? And the answer is, they'd laid their hands upon and caused harm to calculating converts. Calculating converts is converts that didn't do it because they want to be Jewish, because they love Hashem, whatever, but because there's some kind of gain that they can gain, which is basically the Gibeonites. So what the answer here is, these Gibeonites, they had some kind of claim, and the claim involved the necessity to kill and impale the bodies of these princes, the sons and grandsons of Saul. And that's what we did. And those passerbys said, there is no nation as worthy of cleaving to it as this one. If the sons of kings who harmed converts are treated in this manner, all the more so would sons of ordinary people. And if calculating converts are related to in this way, all the more so would this apply to members of the Jewish people themselves. Basically, what they're saying is, okay, so let's get this. Saul committed an injury upon the Gibeonites. The highest of the high, the king himself, injured the lowest of the low, converts, and not converts, but calculating converts. Recall that converts, the ger is supposed to be usually the person who you need to be specifically ordered to treat magnanimously because it's not the usual thing that people do. Calculating converts is even a lower status because they're not people who wanted to join the people of Israel honestly, but they tricked us into it. And what they're saying in here is when Saul injured the lowest of the low, the king injured the lowest of the law of the land says that in order to make expiation, we're willing to kill the children and grandchildren of the king because he injured these calculating converts. So, alachat kama v'chama, would we think that in normal relations, then there's no preferential treatment for the king, for the leadership, and so on. It's not a very satisfying answer, I don't think. But what it's trying to say is we're trying to convert this into a demonstration of a principle that needs to be the foundation of our regard to how we treat the highest of the land. We don't give them preferential treatment. If they hurt whoever, even the lowest of the low, we should be willing to punish them. Now, I don't want to dwell too much on this point because I want to go back to Ritzpah, because she is really our heroine, I think. And Emmanuel Levinas, the French Jewish philosopher, famous philosopher, wrote about this sugya, about this Talmudic sugya, about the biblical story. And this is the last paragraph of what he wrote. He says, and what remains as well, after this somber vision of the human condition and of justice itself, what rises above the cruelty inherent in rational order, and perhaps simply in order. It's interesting, right? There's a cruelty that's inherent in order, because sometimes you need to go out of order in order to be Rahmani. So what rises above is the image of this woman, this mother, this Ritzpah bat Ayah, who for 6 months watches over the corpses of her sons, together with the corpses that are not her sons, to keep from the birds of the air and the beasts of the fields, the victims of the implacable justice of men and of God. What remains after so much blood and tears shed in the name of immortal principles is individual sacrifice, which amidst the dialectical rebounds of justice and all its contradictory about faces, without any hesitation, finds a straight and sure way. With the biblical account and with the Talmud, we've been going this way and that way and here and there. And Levinas says, you know what? After all that work, we're left with Ritzpah. And what did Ritzpah do? She sits there. She doesn't talk. She doesn't cry. She doesn't put up collections. She doesn't go weeping to the king. She just sits there.
What about the bodies of Saul and Jonathan? Did anybody watch over them, or they were left hanging?
They were hanged by the Philistines on the walls of Beit Shean, but the people of Yavesh Gilad rescued them and buried them in Yavesh Gilad. Yes.
So in the end, they were all eunuchs.
Yes.
Saul, John.
Right. And the 7. Right. Now, the Israeli poet Shin Shifra wrote a poem from the lips of Michal, the daughter of Shaul, about Ritzpah. And this is what she says. All summer long, Ritzpa bat Aya, my father's concubine, sat on the mountaintop, spreading sackcloth on the rock. Vultures, eagles, kites pecked at her hair by day. Sun scorched her face like parchment. Foxes and hyenas' howls deafened her ears at night. And Ritzpa, my father's concubine, spreading sackcloth on the rock. The stench of decay has faded. Only the gleam of white bone in midday light. Ritzpai's eyes almost blind all summer long from the beginning of the harvest, spreading sackcloth on the rock until the rains poured, until the shreds of her dress clove to her raisin breasts, and David's hands, as always, did not spill the blood. My father, Saul, my father impaled on the wall of Beit She'an, David's fear even after death. If I had a red-headed, curly-haired son, I would have sat in her place, spreading sackcloth on the rock. It's a very powerful poem, but I want to direct your eyes to the repetition here, spreading sackcloth on the rock, all summer long. It's past that.
There's something just to sit on, basically.
Yes, yes. But she's doing it over and over and over again. And there's something about this perseverance here that is so powerful. It's not for a day, it's not for a week, it's not for a month, it's for a long, long, long time. And you see how she enlarges upon Ritzpa's experience, these vultures, eagles, kites, foxes, hyenas, the howls, this horrible experience that she's going through. But she perseveres. She perseveres. And another poem about Ritzpa. It's interesting that sometimes the most marginal figures provoke the most interest in poets who really want to bring them to life. And so this is an Australian poet from the 19th century. These are excerpts from the poem. And he writes this. Behold, he said, the woman seeks not rest, nor fire, nor food, nor roof, nor any haunt where sojourns man, but rather on yon rock abideth like a wild thing, with the slain, and watcheth them, lest evil wing or paw should light upon the comely faces dead, to spoil them of their beauty. 3 long moons hath Ritzpa, daughter of Aya, dwelt, with drought and cold and rain and wind by turns, and many birds there that know her face, and many beasts that flee not at her step, and many cunning eyes do look at her from serpent holes and burrows of the rat. Moreover, spake the scout, her skin is brown and sere by reason of exceeding heat, and all her darkness of abundant hair is shot with gray, because of many nights when grief hath crouched in fellowship with frost upon that desert rock. And then he goes on, this Australian Christian poet, to write, we have our Ritzpas in these modern days, who've lost their households through no sin of theirs, on bloody fields and in the pits of war. And though their dead were sheltered in the sod by friendly hands, these have not suffered less than she of Judah did, nor is their love surpassed by hers. And you see this connection that he makes between the figure of Ritzpa and the figure of all those mothers and sisters and daughters who've lost soldiers in battle. And sometimes these soldiers have been recovered and sometimes not. But you see how it resonates with this mythological figure of Ritzpa, just sitting there, sitting there, sitting there.
I hate to mention your sackcloth.
Yes,
Henry.
yes.
And were they at the same time, two poets? Did they know each other's poems?
No, Henry Kendall is Australian and he's from the 19th century. I doubt if Saint-Chiffrin knew his poem. You know, this is pre-internet, so these things didn't travel much. But it's just this figure is so powerful that it asks for poetic attention. Now, when I read the story and the sugya and the poems, it really struck me the connections between the story and between Mishmeret 101. You probably remember we were quick to forget, I think, because it was such a painful period that we're happy to forget it. But not a year has passed since we had hostages in Gaza, living and dead. And you may remember that after months and years of political attempts and pressuring both in the Knesset and in the United Nations and in Washington, and demonstrations and screaming and fighting, and there was a small group of mothers of hostages who said, this is not working, we need to do something else. And they said, we're just going to spread our mattresses, our pillows, on the street, and we're just going to sit here in white shirts and be quiet. And that's all they did for months. That's what we did, because they invited all the women of Israel to come and join, and the women of the world. And there were also some vigils around the world. And women came. You can see here, I just collected a few that I personally attended here in Tel Aviv, opposite the Kiryah. You see this building from the Kiryah. And here in Jerusalem by the Knesset, here in Balfour, beside Netanyahu's house. And there were many, many, many vigils all around the country, basically just coming, sitting quietly. And there's something about that quiet presence that it's hard to say demands, because demand feels active and aggressive and so on. But here there was something so different, but so powerful. It was interesting. The police obviously was present around and through these demonstrations, and in the very vocal demonstrations, the police were sometimes quite violent in trying to restrain them. But as the mothers here said, the police are helpless when they encounter this kind of thing, because what can you do against a mother who's sitting on the ground and just waiting for her son? And in one occasion where I was present, the police officer came and spoke on the loudspeaker saying, this is illegal, you should move. And one of the mothers came up and said to him, thank you, you're doing your job, but I'm doing my job. I'm a mother, and this is what I need to do. You do your job, I'll do my job. And the women continued to sit. And I think all of us were somehow involved in this struggle, whether through this or through other means. I think I connected this struggle specifically because there's these elements of silence, of sitting on the ground, of apparent passivity, but still something really very powerful that's encouraging motion in general. And personally, for me, the most moving moment, we had so many moving moments when the hostages were released, but this is Alon Ohel, who's a neighbor of mine in a neighboring village. A really good friend of mine, who's a schoolmate of his, they were really good buddies. And we prayed and sang and demonstrated and sat for him. And then these little clips are of the traffic circle at the bottom of the hill from Shorashim. Shorashim sits on a hill, and there's a half a kilometer road that goes down, and then there's a traffic circle, and this is the main road. And on the day when he was released from hospital and went back home, he passed by Shorashim. And this is the people of Shorashim waiting for him for an hour before with their flags and whatever. And finally, there he was. And it was such a moment. It was such a moment. And of course, thankfully, Alon came back alive and okay. But there were also the bodies who returned. But that too was closure.
Closure.
And I think it's interesting to see this this echoing of these motifs
That's what shiver is supposed to be for. Also,
of women waiting silently but powerfully.
And David finally got that.
Yeah.
Takes a strong woman to do nothing to get there, I think.